In the quiet town of Croydon, Pennsylvania, April 19, 1991, started like any other day. Joy Hibbs, a light-hearted woman with an easy smile, was preparing breakfast while the smell of toast filled the kitchen. She kissed her children on the forehead, wishing them a good day at school, unaware that this would be the last moment of normalcy in her life. The morning continued peacefully, with the sound of birds drifting into the house through the slightly open window, and Joy was already thinking about the day's tasks. However, the calm was abruptly interrupted by a strange smell, followed by thick smoke that quickly spread through the rooms. As the first flames consumed the living room, chaos ensued. Neighbors ran out into the street, alarmed by the sound of sirens echoing through the neighborhood. Firefighters arrived within minutes, battling the fierce blaze that seemed to have an insatiable appetite. The roof collapsed amid terrifying cracks, and the intense heat prevented any immediate rescue attempts. The once serene street turned into a scene of despair and apprehension. Among the residents, nervous whispers began to circulate. Was it an accident, or something far more sinister? The keen eyes of the firefighters, exchanging silent signals, suggested that there was more to this tragedy than met the eye. Upon examining the smoldering wreckage, investigators quickly realized that the fire was not merely a twist of fate. Disturbing evidence was scattered throughout the charred house. Traces of a flammable liquid on the walls, unusual burn patterns, and, most alarming of all, signs of a struggle at the back entrance. The suspicion of a premeditated crime quickly took hold of the investigative team. What initially seemed like a domestic tragedy now took on the contours of a meticulously orchestrated murder. The quiet Croydon, which had never faced something so grim, found itself plunged into a scene worthy of an investigation movie, where every clue pointed to a truth more terrifying than the last. Joy Hibbs was born on September 23, 1955, in the quiet town of Chiefin, Florida, a place where time seemed to move at a slower pace. The youngest of 9 siblings, she grew up surrounded by laughter, outdoor play, and a deep connection with nature. From an early age, Joy displayed an infectious energy, running barefoot through open fields, exploring streams, and climbing trees as if the world were her personal playground. Her passion for sports was evident, whether playing softball on the school field or swimming in the region's crystal-clear rivers. Friends and family described her as someone who always brought a special sparkle to the simplest moments, turning even a walk in the woods into an unforgettable adventure. It was during her teenage years, between track and field tournaments and sunny afternoons at the park, that Joy met Charlie, a young man with an easy smile and a laid-back demeanor. He was immediately captivated by Joy's determination and free spirit, and soon the two became inseparable. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and after graduating from high school, they decided to take the next step. The wedding took place in a modest ceremony surrounded by friends and family, where they promised each other to build a life full of dreams and accomplishments. Charlie saw in Joy a tireless partner, a woman willing to face challenges head-on and with a smile, even when difficulties arose. With great plans for the future, the couple decided to leave their small hometown of Chiefin behind and move to Pennsylvania in search of new opportunities. The transition wasn't easy, but together they built a life that, in the eyes of their neighbors, seemed perfect. The Hibbs house was always filled with laughter, the smell of homemade food, and the typical buzz of a happy family. Joy devoted herself to her children with love and dedication, while Charlie worked tirelessly to provide for the family. But, as in every story that appears flawless on the surface, there were hidden layers that no one could have imagined. And, like the plot of an investigation, small details hinted that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. On that fateful afternoon of April 19, 1991, young David Hibbs was heading home as he did every day, pedaling his bicycle through the quiet neighborhood streets. The cool spring breeze blew gently, and he couldn't wait to tell his mother about his performance on the math test. However, as he turned the corner, a terrifying sight made his heart race. The Hibbs house was engulfed in flames, thick smoke rising into the sky like a dark omen that something terrible had happened. The acrid smell of burning filled the air, and desperate screams echoed through the neighborhood. Without a second thought, David dropped his bike in the middle of the street and ran toward the entrance, the intense heat almost knocking him back. With trembling hands and a mind overwhelmed with fear, David tried to open the front door, calling out his mother's name with a choked voice. But the flames roared like a wild beast, devouring everything in their path. He felt the suffocating heat and realized that entering the house was impossible. Alarmed by the smoke and the boy's cries, neighbors rushed to help him, pulling him away from the collapsing house. One of the neighbors, Mr. Parker, called the firefighters while holding David, who sobbed uncontrollably, his face streaked with tears and soot. The following minutes felt like an eternity, and the only thing the boy could hold on to was the hope that his mother had managed to escape. When the firefighters finally arrived and extinguished the flames, the scene they encountered was even more horrifying. In the last room of the house, amid the charred debris, lay an unrecognizable body, a sight that made even the most experienced professionals exchange heavy glances of silence. The confirmation came shortly after. It was Joy Hibbs. But something was wrong. The body's positioning, the evidence at the scene, and the way the fire had spread immediately raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The investigation was beginning to take an even darker turn, and Croydon's tranquility crumbled in the face of the brutal reality that no one could have foreseen. The autopsy results brought a shocking revelation that transformed the case from a simple house fire to a cruel and calculated murder. The medical examiner confirmed what investigators had already suspected. Joy Hibbs did not die because of the flames. The analysis of her lungs indicated the absence of soot, proving that she was already dead before the fire consumed her home. Shock swept through the small town of Croydon. Who could have committed such a brutal act against a woman loved by everyone? The mystery took on darker contours, and the pressure for answers grew with each passing day. The investigation revealed even more disturbing details. Joy's body bore multiple stab wounds, inflicted with precision, suggesting restrained fury or a personal motive. The marks left behind indicated that she had fought until the very last moment, desperately trying to escape her attacker. The absence of smoke inhalation confirmed that her killer acted coldly, giving her no chance of survival. The crime scene, carefully analyzed, revealed traces of gasoline in strategic locations, suggesting that the fire had been deliberately set to cover up the real crime. The intention was clear: to make the murder appear as a tragic household accident. Firefighters and forensic experts identified 4 distinct points of origin for the fire, a crucial detail that ruled out any possibility of an accident. Someone wanted to ensure that the entire house was destroyed, erasing evidence and complicating the investigation. The questions multiplied. Who had the motive to kill Joy so brutally? And more importantly, what could she have known that justified such a meticulous crime? The case took on the feel of a true investigative thriller, with clues emerging from every meticulous analysis of the wreckage and the growing sense that the truth was more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. When investigators began piecing together the mysterious murder, the first name to surface on the list of suspects was Charlie, Joy's husband. After all, in cases like this, the spouse is usually the primary focus of the authorities. Could he be capable of such a brutal act? Friends and family described Charlie as a calm, hard-working man who had always been a devoted husband and loving father. However, behind appearances, the police knew that marital relationships are not always what they seem. The detectives' keen eyes searched for signs of unresolved conflicts, financial issues, or any hidden motive that could have driven Charlie to commit such a heinous crime. Despite initial suspicions, Charlie was quick to present a solid alibi. He was at work at the time of the fire, with detailed records confirming his presence. Additionally, co-workers supported his account, describing him as visibly shaken when he received the news. Even so, the police did not immediately rule out his possible involvement. As with any thorough investigation, all possibilities needed to be explored before they could be dismissed entirely. The interrogations were intense, with detectives searching for any inconsistencies that might indicate a lie, but Charlie remained steadfast in his innocence. Over time, the evidence made it clear that Charlie had no involvement in Joy's murder. With no apparent motives and no concrete proof linking him to the crime, the police had to pursue new leads and explore other potential suspects. The case seemed to grow even more complex, with each path leading to more questions than answers. Who else might have had a reason to end Joy's life? Had she gotten involved in something dangerous without her family knowing? The weight of uncertainty hung over the town, and the investigation took an unexpected turn, uncovering hidden secrets lurking in the shadows of Joy Hibbs' seemingly perfect life. As the investigation progressed, detectives began to consider the possibility of a robbery that had tragically gone wrong. The discovery of Joy's empty purse on the kitchen floor seemed to point in that direction. Scattered documents, rummaged drawers, and the slightly open back door suggested that someone had entered the house in a hurry, perhaps looking for something valuable. Initially, the theory of a burglary gone wrong appeared plausible, an opportunistic criminal who might have been caught off guard by Joy and reacted violently. However, something didn't quite add up. Why were other valuable items, such as jewelry and electronics, left untouched? Detectives meticulously analyzed the crime scene and realized that the supposed thief seemed to have a very specific focus: Joy's purse. The contents found scattered around the kitchen raised more questions than answers. No money, cards, or documents were present, only personal items of no significant value. Moreover, there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator possibly knew Joy or had a way to enter without drawing attention. The suspicions began to drift away from the idea of a random burglary and pointed to something much darker: a crime committed by someone familiar with her routines and with specific intentions. With this new perspective, the investigation took a different turn. Detectives started to believe that Joy wasn't merely a victim of chance but the target of a carefully orchestrated attack. The idea of an ordinary burglar was dismissed, and the focus shifted to people within her social and family circle. Could someone close to her have used the robbery as a distraction to cover up their true intentions? The crime now bore all the hallmarks of something personal: revenge, a settling of scores, or perhaps even a deadly secret from the past resurfacing. The investigation deepened, revealing that the truth behind Joy Hibbs' death was far more complex than anyone had imagined. In the months leading up to her death, Joy Hibbs began to notice that something was wrong. Small incidents that initially seemed like mere coincidences started happening more frequently, leaving her feeling uneasy. First, there were mysterious scratches on her car, then paint stains on the newly painted backyard fence. She tried to brush it off, believing it to be the work of idle neighborhood teenagers, but deep down, something told her there was more to these actions. Even so, Joy carried on with her routine, keeping a smile on her face as she always did. However, the discomfort grew, and the feeling of being watched became a constant presence in her life. Over time, the incidents escalated. One morning, Joy found the trash can overturned, papers scattered across the yard, and a message scrawled in shaky letters on one of the house's windows: "Be careful." Her heart raced, and for the first time, she felt real fear. Charlie tried to reassure her, saying it was probably just a bad prank, but Joy couldn't shake the feeling that she was being targeted by something more sinister. Anonymous phone calls, strange noises at night, and a persistent sensation of being followed turned her once peaceful life into a series of unsettling moments. With each new incident, her concern grew, but without concrete evidence, there was little she could do beyond warning a few close friends. After her tragic death, these events took on a new meaning for investigators. What once seemed like a series of random occurrences now started to connect in a disturbing way. Someone had been sending messages, testing Joy, perhaps even preparing for something far worse. Detectives began reviewing these threats with fresh eyes, trying to identify a pattern or a connection to people in her life. Now, the murder case that haunted Croydon had taken on a new layer of mystery, and the search for answers became even more urgent. The question that echoed among investigators was clear: who had such a vested interest in tormenting Joy before her death? As the investigation progressed, a new lead emerged from reports by observant neighbors. On the afternoon of the fire, a blue car was seen parked for a long time in front of Joy Hibbs' house. At first, it seemed like just another detail lost in the chaos of that day, but when David, Joy's son, learned about it, something inside him triggered an alert. He immediately mentioned to the police that a close family friend, April, owned an identical vehicle. Was it just a coincidence? Or could the blue car be the missing piece investigators had been searching for? Detectives knew they couldn't overlook this connection, and attention turned to April and her husband, Robert, a man with a troubled past and an unfriendly reputation. April had always been a constant presence in the Hibbs family's life. She and Joy shared moments together, exchanged recipes, and confided in each other, but her personal life was marked by turmoil that few knew about. Her marriage to Robert was, at the very least, complicated. He had a reputation for being a hot-tempered man, with frequent outbursts of anger that made him feared among neighbors. Witnesses recalled heated arguments between the couple, some of them happening uncomfortably close to Joy's house. The police began connecting the dots. Could April and Joy's friendship have become a source of conflict between her and Robert? Or, even worse, had Joy become entangled in something that provoked his fury? Detectives decided to delve deeper into the couple's background, revisiting old police reports and speaking with acquaintances. The accounts were disturbing. Robert was known for his aggressive and possessive behavior, and many believed he was capable of losing control in moments of anger. The blue car no longer seemed like an insignificant detail, but rather a crucial lead that could directly link Robert to the crime. The case was taking a new direction, and the possibility that Joy's murder had been motivated by something far more personal and explosive was becoming more real with each new discovery. Investigators knew they were getting closer to the truth, but how far would Robert have gone to hide his secrets? As investigators delved deeper into their suspicions about Robert, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. He wasn't just a man with a difficult temperament. His criminal record revealed a past filled with violent incidents, including assaults and threats. To the neighbors in the quiet town of Croydon, he was the kind of person everyone preferred to avoid, someone with an intimidating presence and an ever-suspicious gaze. Police records showed a long list of charges, ranging from bar fights to domestic violence incidents against his wife, April. The connection between him and Joy Hibbs was becoming clearer, and the motive for the murder seemed darker than ever. Joy, known for her kindness and strong sense of justice, couldn't simply turn a blind eye to April's suffering. Determined to help, she offered emotional support and even a safe place for her to escape Robert's abuse. This decision, although noble, may have been the catalyst for his uncontrollable rage. For a man like Robert, losing control over April wasn't just a defeat, it was an affront to his twisted sense of masculinity. Witnesses reported that shortly before the tragedy, he had been seen lurking around Joy's house, as if he were planning something. The possibility that he orchestrated the fire as an act of revenge was becoming increasingly plausible. Detectives began to consider the hypothesis that the fire had been meticulously planned by Robert to cover up his true objective, to silence Joy once and for all. The pieces of evidence started to fit together. The blue car parked near the house, the veiled threats Joy had received months earlier, and even the fact that no valuables had been taken, ruling out the idea of a simple robbery. The investigation was now taking a decisive turn, and the hunt for concrete evidence against Robert intensified. Fear loomed over the town. If he was capable of something like this, what else could he be hiding? As the investigation progressed, all the clues seemed to point to Robert. His violent history, previous threats, and connection to April made him the perfect suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence proved to be a major obstacle. The police scrutinized every detail of his life, searching for any inconsistency that could break his alibi, but he remained steadfast. On the day of the crime, Robert claimed to have been in a neighboring town with his wife and children, and April confirmed that they had checked into the hotel at 8 a.m. The receptionist's testimony corroborated their story, although the details were vague and imprecise. Still, without material evidence directly linking him to the murder, authorities found themselves at a standstill. The investigators did not give up easily. They analyzed phone records, reviewed security camera footage, and re-interviewed neighbors and acquaintances, trying to find anything that could dismantle Robert's carefully constructed alibi. However, every lead pursued led to dead ends. Even the blue car seen on the day of the crime failed to provide concrete proof, as there was no definitive record linking it to Robert. Frustration grew among the detectives, who felt they were close to the truth but lacked the legal means to prove it. The case, which once seemed on the verge of being solved, began to stall, and the fear that the culprit would walk free became increasingly real. As time passed, the lack of new evidence caused the investigation to lose momentum. The community, which had once demanded justice, slowly began to accept the painful reality that they might never truly know who killed Joy Hibbs. Local newspapers covered the story for weeks until new cases took over the headlines. Life moved on in Croydon, but for Joy's family, time seemed to have frozen on the day of the fire. The mystery lingered in the air like a shadow hanging over the town. And for the detectives, one unsettling question remained. Where was the missing piece that would finally link Robert to the crime? Years passed, but for Joy Hibbs' family, the wound never healed. Every birthday, every holiday, and every special moment was tainted by her absence and the lack of answers. The case, which once mobilized the entire town, was slowly relegated to oblivion, becoming just another dusty file in the police archives. Charlie and his children tried to move on, but the sense of injustice hung over their lives like a constant shadow. They never gave up seeking the truth, calling investigators, collecting newspaper clippings, and trying to keep Joy's memory alive, hoping that one day someone would notice something that had previously gone unnoticed. But with each passing year, hope dwindled, and the mystery remained unsolved. Despite the passage of time, the pain of losing Joy so brutally never faded. For the Hibbs family, the frustration was suffocating, and the sense of helplessness became harder to bear. The Croydon police faced a harsh reality. Without new leads and with no witnesses willing to come forward, the case remained in limbo, an unsolved murder that left everyone unsettled. Friends and family insisted that someone knew more than they were saying, but without concrete evidence, little could be done. The original detectives on the case, now retired, carried the frustration of not having delivered justice, while the new investigators had other priorities. Time, cruel and relentless, seemed to bury any chance of solving the mystery deeper with each passing day. It wasn't until 2014, more than 2 decades later, that a new glimmer of hope emerged. The State Police's Cold Case Division decided to review Joy Hibbs' case, bringing a fresh perspective and new technological tools to the investigation. Advanced DNA analysis, forensic re-examinations, and new interrogation techniques reignited the flame of justice. For the family, this news brought a mix of hope and fear. They might finally find the answers they had been seeking for so long, but they also feared reliving the pain of all those years of uncertainty. Investigators reopened the files, revisited old suspects, and began to chart a new path, determined to uncover the truth that had remained hidden for so long. The reopening of the case brought to light a revelation that took everyone by surprise. Robert, the prime suspect, had been a protected police informant in a narcotics case. This crucial detail, which had never been disclosed to Joy Hibbs' family, explained why he had so easily slipped through the cracks of the investigation years ago. At the time of the crime, Robert was providing valuable information about a drug trafficking network operating in the area and, in return, was granted a form of silent immunity. The Narcotics Division, which had interrogated Robert back then, had been instructed not to investigate him. For the Hibbs family, this revelation was devastating. The feeling of betrayal was inevitable. How could someone already under police scrutiny have been ignored as a suspect in such a brutal murder? With each new discovery, it became increasingly clear that the pursuit of justice had been compromised from the very beginning. The fact that Robert was an informant meant that the authorities, in a way, were protecting him, avoiding thorough investigations to prevent jeopardizing ongoing operations. This explained his questionable alibi, the unreliable witnesses, and the lack of pressure on him during the initial interrogations. For Charlie and Joy's children, this information reopened old wounds, and their frustration grew. They began to question to what extent justice had truly been on their side, or if they had been overlooked in favor of larger interests. The revelation of this long-hidden secret brought a new urgency to the investigation. The cold case team knew that, this time, they could not repeat the mistakes of the past. Detectives revisited every detail, looking for inconsistencies in Robert's previous statements and trying to uncover whether others had been covering up his actions. For the Hibbs family, it was a moment of hope but also caution. They knew that going up against someone with connections within the police system wouldn't be easy, but they were determined not to let the truth be buried once again. The pressing question now was, how many more secrets were still hidden beneath a case that had taken so long to be reopened? It was in 2016 that the truth, long suffocated by fear, finally came to light. After years of silence, April decided to speak. In a confession filled with tears and remorse, she revealed to investigators what many had already suspected. Robert was, in fact, responsible for the murder of Joy Hibbs. On that fateful afternoon, he returned home with blood-stained clothes, breathless and visibly disturbed. Unable to hide the truth, he looked April in the eye and, with chilling coldness, said he had taken care of the problem. Shock paralyzed her, and though she wanted to run, scream, or seek help, she knew that any wrong move could cost her own life. 4 years, April lived under a cloud of terror, imprisoned by constant threats and the fear that Robert might do to her what he had done to Joy. Each day was a silent torture, each glance a reminder that she carried a dangerous secret. Fear prevented her from telling anyone. Not friends, not the police, not even her closest family members. She endured it all alone, trying to erase the memories of that day while Robert continued his life as if nothing had happened. But the guilt was overwhelming. Her nights were plagued by nightmares, with Joy's voice echoing in her mind, pleading for justice. The weight of silence became unbearable until she finally found the courage to speak. April's confession reignited the investigation and breathed new life into the case. For detectives, her testimony was the missing piece to directly link Robert to the crime. He was no longer just a suspect with a flimsy alibi. Now, with a witness willing to tell everything, it was clear that he had planned the crime and attempted to cover his tracks with the arson. When the Hibbs family learned of the confession, they felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief for finally knowing the truth, but anger at the fact that this information had been so close for years while they struggled with uncertainty and grief. Now, with April finally breaking her silence, justice seemed closer than ever. With April's confession in hand, detectives knew they had a unique opportunity to finally close the case that had haunted Croydon for more than 3 decades. But to secure a definitive conviction, they needed more than just the testimony of a terrified woman. The investigative team devised a meticulous plan to capture Robert once and for all. Under police guidance, April agreed to wear a hidden recorder and meet with him in a controlled environment. The tension was palpable. She knew that any wrong move could put her in danger once again. With a trembling voice, she brought up memories of the past, recalling the fateful night of the murder, while detectives, monitoring from a distance, anxiously awaited every word Robert would say. The strategy worked better than expected. Feeling secure, believing that his secret was still safe, Robert ended up letting slip crucial details about the crime. In a moment of carelessness, he mentioned how he had cleaned up the mess and ensured that no one would ever find out. Every recorded word was a fatal blow to his defense, and investigators knew they finally had the proof they had been searching for. The recording was thoroughly analyzed, and audio experts confirmed that the voice was undeniably Robert's. With this irrefutable evidence, the police moved swiftly. In a well-coordinated operation, Robert was arrested in 2022, having no idea that his past had finally caught up with him. News of Robert's arrest brought a wave of relief to Joy's family. For over 30 years, they had lived with the pain of uncertainty and the frustration of a system that seemed to have failed them. Now, however, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The town of Croydon, which had learned to live with the dark memory of the crime, celebrated the fact that justice, though delayed, had finally been served. Charlie and his children could finally find a semblance of peace, knowing that the man responsible for so much pain was now where he belonged, behind bars. Joy Hibbs' story, marked by suffering and mystery, had found its resolution. But for those who loved her, she would always be remembered not for the tragedy, but for the love and courage that defined her life. The sentence was delivered in a packed courtroom, where every gaze was fixed on the man who had evaded justice for so long. Robert was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the verdict, a heavy silence filled the room, followed by a collective sigh of relief. For the Hibbs family, that moment represented the end of a long and painful journey. Tears streamed down the faces of Charlie and his children, but this time they were tears of closure, tears from a weight that was finally beginning to lift. After 3 decades of uncertainty and pain, they could finally say that Joy had received the justice she so deserved. However, the victory came at a price. Joy's story exposed glaring flaws in the judicial system, revealing how bureaucracy and hidden interests often delay the pursuit of truth. The fact that Robert remained free for so long, protected by his role as an informant, sparked outrage and raised difficult questions. How many other cases were trapped in the same failing mechanisms of the system? The investigation had been marked by ignored leads, overlooked evidence, and a lack of urgency that cost the Hibbs family years of suffering. Despite the conviction, the scars left by the negligence would not easily fade. Joy Hibbs' case became a symbol of perseverance and hope for other families still waiting for answers. It serves as a painful yet necessary reminder that justice can be slow, but the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to surface. Joy's story will be told for generations, not just as a tragedy, but as proof that those who fight for justice should never give up. Though the pain of loss will never fully disappear, Charlie and his children were finally able to find a way to move forward, knowing that Joy's memory will live on, not only in sorrow, but in the justice they fought so hard to achieve. If you enjoyed this video and want to keep exploring scary and intriguing stories, don't forget to subscribe to the Spooky Stories channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of the darkest mysteries and chilling events we share here. And, of course, leave your comment. Which part of this story gave you the biggest chills? Or is there a case you'd like us to cover? Share your ideas and join our community. And don't stop here. Click on the video now appearing on your screen and keep diving into the most spine-tingling stories we've selected just for you. With every click, you get closer to the unknown. And remember, here at Spooky Stories, fear is just the beginning.